you are kind of going up and up and up in this thing. And so do you lose boxes or do you just keep the whole thing as you go?
There is. I'm sorry. I've tried to make this as short as possible. And each of these teams is made up of these boxes that you gain. You keep adding boxes, but there is also one box in the end that has a lot of dots, 5 dots, because each of these things that you say about yourself is made of 2 parts. There is a mechanical effect, let's call it a benefit, and there is a statement. I call them tenets. Basically, it's a statement about yourself.
Yeah.
And there is a dynamic here where if you betray your statement, like for example, let's take the knight. You have picked the small box that say that you're protecting your lord. Let's make it very simple. So if I don't protect, if I break the tenet and I don't protect my lord, I cross 1 dot in the Oathbreaker box at the end, which changes me, which deletes the thing over. If the narrator breaks then, so it doesn't let me do what I've stated about myself, I get something back, basically.
This is really complicated. You're creating a really interesting set of subroutines that is turning into a big wheel and choices. And if you do that, but then it could go this way if I do that. And stuff like that.
Basically, this part, I know it's what makes the part where you're not fighting work at the moment. It's what drives the experience when you're not in the part where you're not fighting. Is at the moment is maybe we should talk about it another time, but it's very important.
Well, I agree. I mean, I'm saying that we are going to look at this, but I'm going to raise the issue that matters to me about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
First of all, the point I made earlier about over-engineering through point spending and talking is already, I can hear it coming back already.
Yeah.
I can hear that same issue coming back already. You're not going to be happy unless everything is accounted for by a shift in a point in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Let's remember that you probably only need about 25% of that for this to work.
Yes,
that's one thing. So another thing is that how is there an ending? How is there an ending? With all of its flaws, at least 4th edition D&D has an ending. Granted, it doesn't, it takes too long to get there, but but it is there.
Level 20. I mean, either you die or you get level if the group decides to drop it before.
Well, which level?
20.
No. Which class or heritage?
The class thing. Okay. The class thing is.
Well, you see, this is kind of interesting because it seems to me as though the proper ending has nothing to do with class or heritage. The proper ending, or what level those are. The proper ending has to do with the life path.
That's why I changed the term life in later. The current incarnation, because I think life
path. What is the new name for it?
Team, like in D&D, the team. Because life path, I really liked it, but it brought me where you are now. I was like, okay, I need to make these the things that drives the story, and I'm tempted to do that and to double down on that, but it brings me away from the original design, and I'm afraid of creating, 2 games glued together,
Yeah, I completely, well, you see, that's what I'm afraid of. The more you make a subroutine and system out of this life path, the more you're creating a separate game that you're gluing together.
Yeah.
We don't want to, you're right, you don't want to do that. But that doesn't change what I just said, which is that class going up to level 20 means going nowhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything. It's just an arbitrary stop point. It might be 19. It might be 21. Who cares?
Sure. Absolutely.
Right?
Yes.
So there's nothing there. And other games have tried it and they don't do it either. It's just, it really isn't anything except saying, hey, everybody, the clock is ticking. Let's have the last adventure be really big.
That's, I think, the difficult thing is when, even as a player, not even speaking as a designer, but when you sit down with certain kind of games, you never think about how it's going to end. You're like, oh, I want to have fun, and I will. This can go on forever until at some point you're stopping having fun.
Well,
And you
that
stop
doesn't
playing.
sound like a really good battle plan, does it? I'm going to play
No,
this
yeah,
until
yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
no
yeah.
good.
But that's the point. I think that the thing you said. I mean, it's a very good insight on my reasoning, because the reason is what's called life path.
Yeah.
Okay, if I share with you like the night I sat one night and I designed it, and I made this talent tree shaped like a shield. I'm very visual, and it was basically really a life path, a story. You go to this and this and that and this and this. And in one hand, I liked it. In the other, I don't want to become, to do the kind of game that forces play the experience on,
Right.
because I
You
will
you
make a
have
small
a
note.
lot of modeling in these computer games and digital games and platform games. You
Yeah.
reference them a lot. And I can
Yeah.
see again and again that's where you're going for your design aesthetic or your design model. And then your own play instincts, fortunately, you listen to them and you realize that's not where you really need to be.
Yeah.
Because a talent tree like that, the life tree like that, and everything like that is perfect for one of those games.
Yes.
It's not what we're doing here.
No.
So let's go back again. Let's go back. Let's pretend that I understand all of the mechanics that we've talked about today
Yeah.
much better than I understand them for real.
Mhm.
Let's pretend I understand them really well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
The,
And frankly, I quite like them. So that's
okay.
so let's
That's
let's
nice.
work with that. I'm looking at these characters and going, this is good, solid fantasy play.
Yeah, okay. Perfect.
But there's only one reason that keeps it from being a heartbreaker. You have to let go of what D&D taught you was the right thing to do. And what D&D taught you was the right thing to do was that if you have your weapons and your spells, and if you get bigger and better and bigger and better, that this, and if you had the right, if the guy playing the dwarf speaks with a Scottish accent,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and if we get the dragon's egg after 5 sessions before we're too bored, then this is fantasy.
Mm.
That's what D&D teaches us as a culture.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's not fantasy.
No.
Right? So let's take a look at this and say, where is the fantasy? And no video game, no digital game, no platform game will teach you that.
No.
They will not.
No.
So
No.
where is the fantasy? And that's how you know when and how it should end.
Mm-hmm.
Especially an ending as an emergent effect, not as a designated goal like a certain number. Maybe not even the end of the life path. Okay, we hit the end of the life path, we have to end. That's not what I mean. I mean using the life path to find the right point for there to be an ending.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so therefore you don't know when it's going to end, but you know that your use of the life path will let you know what you decide to do. And also
Yeah.
that this life path therefore mechanically should be minimal. There's a mechanism for adding to it and things like that, but it should be very soft in comparison. There should not be 100 ways for the points over in your abilities to jump onto the life path, and a way for the
No. No.
life
No. No.
path
No.
gives
No.
you a bonus to do this, and then the
No. No. No.
GM can spend a point to do that, and all kinds of shit like that, right? So,
No.
but the point is, therefore, that's why I'm asking you, before we go into all the life path rules and everything, let's just think about what it's for, and whether, if you think so, this might be the better way to determine when we are at the ending. Not
Yeah.
to dictate when it is, but for us to say, is this a good ending?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And so, or maybe for this character, There are a couple of games. One of them is Shock. And I don't know if the rewrite is like this, but in the original game, there were a number of effectively story points of the GM. And you didn't really spend them you spent them for dice. So if you wanted to roll at all, you would just take some of your dice bank and roll. After you had rolled a certain amount, I could be saying this wrong, but after you have rolled a certain amount, then you can say at the end of every scene or situation, I'm trying to remember who would say this, but there was an option to end the game. And when you were finally completely out of them, then you had to end.
Yeah.
So in other words, you had the option to end if it seemed like a good ending.
Yes.
And then there was also the designated ending. Okay, you have to end. And so that's one way. A similar thing from a game at about the same time. It was called Nine Worlds by Matt Snyder, and it has several complex. You'll see it in the diagram videos.
Okay.
It had several complex cycles, and in one of them, which was kind of the most important one that you would experience a lot during play, if you were at the point where you had cleared yourself of what were called muses, you had the option, you always had the option to make up more muses. But if you didn't want to, and you cleared out your muses and you said, you know what, there's nothing else this character wants to do, or this is the good place for this character to exit the story.
Yeah.
You could do it. And you could keep playing with a new character, but the point is that it was easy. It wasn't absolutely voluntary at any moment, but there were some mechanical criteria at which point where you had said, and that's the end for this guy. And so the combination of these two, the reason I bring up both of these games is that particular option concerned, in one case, the overall session, the overall group, the overall story. In the other one, it had to do with a single character. Right? Those two different kinds of endings, right? But in both cases, you had mechanical criteria for the choice to do it. So it wasn't mechanics made me or I get to choose freely. It was under some mechanical circumstances, then I have this choice.
Yeah.
This is another reason why the whole fiction first, mechanics first thing is garbage. They don't intersect. They don't run on parallel tracks. Right. So in this case, I'm looking at this, and just the graphic alone lets me know it is beautifully constructed for doing exactly that.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an interesting point that you actually have staring at me a gorgeous opportunity for pacing play and dealing with characters' fates, which of course has everything to do with how they relate to society.
Yeah.
And therefore, all of their adventures, like fighting minotaurs, is not irrelevant to that. It actually is the shape of what brings them to the next box and what's going to be in the next box.
Yeah.
Right? So you have a very nice interaction that's possible between the two. And there's only two ways to ruin it. The first way to ruin it, we've talked about twice already, which is that you force it. You say, well, if you accomplish these tasks, then you can choose from these boxes, these labels for the next box, right? To over mechanize what happens next.
Yes.
That's one way to ruin it. The other way to ruin it is for it to have no relationship to what just happened. And just say, well, choose whatever you want in your next box.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, so
I like that we got to this.
Right. We can't go deeper into that. This is obviously the next topic.